Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now today's video we're going to be discussing which should be the last banner before BT Plus comes along, and don't worry, I will be making a video on BT Plus as well, but we're going to be talking about Vivi and Deuce's banner for the story event. Now there's not actually a lot to talk about with this event, so I guess we'll just get right into it. So if you want to learn more about Vivi's LD boards and the event itself, then stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, don't forget to check all of my links in the description box below, including Twitch, where you can find me streaming Dissidia, Final Fantasy XIV, and lots of other things. Patreon, where I give thanks to all of my patrons that have decided to support the channel further, as it is a huge thing for me, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do the videos at the frequency in which I do. And I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video. And today that person is going to be Kalivis, who has Y'shtola in their title card, as I'm sure many people will agree, because Y'shtola is a fantastic character and we all love her dearly. So a massive thank you to you, Kalivis, and to all of my patrons as well. And I have actually also set up recently a coffee account as well, so if you'd like to consider supporting the channel in that way, then you might want to consider clicking on that link in the description box as well. I'm quite new to it, so I don't know an awful lot about it, but if people want to have a look at it and give me tips on things that they'd like to see from it, then I'd love to hear from you. Of course, don't forget to check out all of the other fantastic content creators for Dissidia as well, and all of the other resources that I leave in the description box below for you to have a look at too. Okay, so now let's take a look at the banner itself, as we always do in these videos, but quite honestly, this is probably the shortest overview of the banners I'm probably ever going to do on this channel, purely because there's not an awful lot to talk about. So on the banner itself is going to feature Vivi and Deuce's full kit, so LD, EX, etc. It's also going to be your last chance to get X-Death BT if you haven't got it already, and then it's also going to feature Rydia EX as obviously a part for Chaos Challenge, etc. Now Deuce is pretty much exactly the same as she was last time, and Deuce is not a character I'm going to go over in any great detail, and if you want to learn more about her, you can go back and see my video all about her. But she doesn't really have anything particularly new to offer, and given that we have so many strong support characters like Yuna, Y'shtola coming up, etc., I don't think Deuce really holds a candle to any of those characters. She's a nice extra if you do decide to pull on this banner, but she's certainly not somebody I would actively chase after. And then Vivi, the problem with Vivi is that pretty much everyone who's been playing for a while already has Vivi from the fact that we got his LD as a global first last year. So it's going to be interesting to see quite how many people do decide to pull on this. That being said, he does get some nice bits. He gets LD boards, and he also gets like level 80, so LD call abilities. He gets like all of that good stuff, and he gets his he gets a little rework as well. So his rework makes it so that Fire, which you'll never use, and Fire Plus, which you'll always use, have 50% splash damage, and then Fire Plus, which is the version you get after using his focus, will turn the bravery attacks into AoE, which is actually really good at cementing like the fact that he is an AoE magic damage dealer, because he does a large amount of splash damage on all of his stuff. He gets like 100% AoE damage, HP damage on his LD in the follow-up from it. There's a lot there to like. And then Focus now has no action delay whatsoever. It does still take a turn up, sadly, but it has no action delay now, so you'll be able to use Focus and then one of his other attacks straight away. So Vivi's LD weapon, if you haven't already used it, it consumes 30% of your party's HP, which sounds like a bad thing, but so provided that you can heal it back off again, then you can actually use this to your advantage by way of certain passives, summons that like you having less than 80% of your HP, like Odin or Leviathan or even Alexander. There's things that you can do to manipulate this to your advantage. And then it does a defense-ignoring multi-HP dump or double HP dump attack with full HP damage to all targets that does fire resist down and gives 5 stacks of his Doomsday stacks, which basically makes it so that all of your attacks with Vivi, including his C65, anything that he does a follow-up that is also a HP consuming, defense ignoring, AoE, brave HP attack that ignores defense and you know, does full AoE HP damage. So basically you're getting a decent amount of damage out of him from the get-go. So what is it he gets here that we haven't already seen from him the last time? Well, his LD boards don't add a huge amount that's massively exciting, but they do increase his numbers. So Doomsday itself has its bravery hit count increased, and also makes it so that you get the Doomsday stacks before Doomsday itself goes off, so you're going to get that follow-up straight away from using Doomsday, which means that Doomsday itself gets an extra HP dump, essentially, so you're going to get that extra turn of the Burning Embers attack. And then the Embers of Darkness attack itself gives him more bravery fund after he uses it, which is quite handy. And it also makes it so that the buff that you have from Doomsday makes it so that his elemental weakness damage is higher, his HP damage dealt is higher, and then when you get to the last stack of it, your HP damage goes up again by 20%, so that last hit hits significantly harder. Well, if you guys have used Vivi up until this point, you already know how he works, and, you know, his rework and his LD boards don't change it massively. His damage definitely sort of keeps up to speed, and the defense ignoring properties of his attacks is really nice, and he's still got his Fire Enchant to self, the Fire Imperil on his EX and his LD, and obviously he has a lot of HP dumps thanks to his double fire HP plus attack that he gets from Meteor. Meteor itself is multiple HP dumping, and his LD, of course, is a multiple HP dumping as well. So you've got lots of AoE damage flying about here, there, and everywhere. However, that is all Vivi's done. That's all he's ever really done, is he has big max bravery boosts from focus and large amounts of fire damage from all of his attacks. So while he's good and he is very nice to have, most people already have him and are going to be really, like myself, looking forward to the LD boards, etc., so you can kind of pull him out again, because he's never really been bad as a damage dealer. People were using him up until very recently. So to be able to have him kind of updated and up to scratch just before BT Plus comes about is great. But he is just a damage dealer, and I mean that in the sense that there are a lot of damage dealers coming around at this point in time. We've just had Zell, Varn's recently been a massive, massive damage dealer, who obviously has access to a BT. There's a lot of different options you have access to when it comes to damage, and if fire damage is what you're looking for, Ignis comes into play here as well. Ignis is very good because he has access to Enchant and Imperil for the party, whereas Vivi only does it for himself. So there's that to consider as well. So is Vivi good? Yeah, and if you already have him, fantastic. You absolutely can pull him back out again. Should you really be pulling for Vivi at this point when we've got so many massive banners coming up in the near future? In my opinion, probably not. Now, Vivi obviously gets LD call abilities here as well, and I actually kind of like Vivi's LD call ability. Not only just because it does do the party HP consumption, triggering your Odins, your Leviathans, various passives for certain characters. I think having access to that is quite a nice niche that you wouldn't really get elsewhere, and you're still getting a pretty hefty HP attack off of it that ignores defense, so in situations where enemies crank their defense really high, it might come in handy. And you get Fire Imperil and Fire Enchant, as well as HP damage up, elemental weakness damage up, attack up. So on a character that does a lot of off-turn damage, like Yang, you might find a really good use for this. It's definitely a nice one to have access to, just on the back of the fact that it does a lot of different things a lot of characters don't do. That being said though, if you have access to Ignis and you want fire damage, you're more than likely just going to use Ignis Call instead of Vivi, unless you want to trigger those passives from Odin, etc., without actually allowing the enemy to attack you. In terms of gear, his armor is attack keystone, and he does a 20% flat rate of bravery and HP damage limits to himself, and like most characters, certainly damage dealers at this point, this is going to come down to whether you are going to use Vivi a lot. And at this point, well, that's up to you at this point. There's no right or wrong answer when it comes to armor. What you really should be looking at is characters that you plan to use a lot of. With it being scarce, I'm probably not going to give Vivi HA+, even though I really like him and I probably will find uses for him. But only because I know that there's some much, much bigger characters coming out sort of very, very soon that I think are going to have more access to it. And I don't normally talk about artifact passives, but Vivi does have cursed artifacts. He has Fire Charge and Buff Attack Speed. Fire Charge only gives him uses of fire, which given the rotation of his skills, you shouldn't ever really need. And Buff Attack Speed raises his attack by 20% for each copy of it have, so you're probably going to want that because you want Vivi's attack to be as high as it can possibly go. So in terms of the event itself, so we're coming to the end of the current story chapter that features Vivi, And the Lufenia mission for this is 2 waves again, similar to the last one that we did with Xander's Lost Chapter. The first wave isn't anything you'll really have to worry about too much. The only thing they can do, and if you've played FF9, you'll recognise these guys at the Battle of Alexandria, so I got a little bit of a fangasm from this particular fight. That, you know, they can put you to sleep, you know, with their recast attack, and that can be annoying because it just kind of sets you back with stuff like, you know, just making it so that you have to wait until you wake up or wait until the enemy attacks you to tick that down, in a very similar vein to Edward's LD attack. It's just annoying more than anything, but they don't have an awful lot of HP. You should be able to get through this pretty quickly. The actual boss of the fight is the twin Tiamats that we've fought many, many times, but these Tiamats are actually particularly nasty for multiple reasons. So the orb itself asks for you to deal 150,000 fire damage within 1 turn. So obviously Vivi is the character designed to do this because he'll do it practically every time he attacks, and with +4 to the turn count, Vivi should get you covered for the orb. If you don't want to use Vivi, Ignis is literally perfect for this. Not only because he has fire damage enchant for the party, but because he also has debuff evasion added to his kit. Now the Tiamats do a lot of different nasty things with regards to what attacks they do. They like to dispel your buffs a lot, which is really particularly nasty. Like their lightning bolt attack dispels, their maelstrom attack can dispel, they have paralysis in their kit. They have a lot of really nasty things, but the nastiest thing they have is a HP poison attack that is dependent on the inflicted attack, and therefore you can lose a lot of HP very quickly if you don't do something about that particular debuff. So Yuna, Ignis, Aerith, anyone that can remove those debuffs is very much going to be handy, as well as any character that finds it easy to reapply buffs. So Vivi, for example, can focus, get his buffs back, and just carry on as he was, because most of his stuff comes off of his special effect. And the same can be true of a lot of characters as well with special effects, like Yuna with Valor 4, etc. Now you will have to be careful of that, because not only that, but the enemies put on a defensive stance as well that give them a huge defense up, defense ignore from Vivi, big shields, and they can't take HP damage while they have these shields, and they lock their turns in place, they can't be delayed, they can't, like, nothing can happen to them, and then they're going to do an AoE Brave HP attack if you leave them alone, so you have to deal a large amount of damage as quickly as possible. So again, Vivi, Varn, Tidus, Setzer, anyone that can deal a large amount of damage quickly is who you're going to want to take to this. Bringing along debuff evasion, etc. is going to be handy. If you wanted to, you can 0 boss turn this quite easily as well, because it's elemental damage required, which means that you can take either Vivi or Ignis LD Call, stick it on a Yang, put Terra next to him, and just go to town. That's definitely a viable option as well, or Cloud of Darkness, things like that. You know, while you can't necessarily delay the enemy, you can hog turns through your Tiduses, your Terras, etc., and that'll work absolutely fine. A lot of the clears that I've watched have been, you know, disallowing the boss from taking turns. So if that's the way that you want to go about it, then that's a perfectly viable option as well. So when it comes to asking the question as to whether you should pull on this banner, I think it's a fairly obvious no. Only on the back of the fact of its timing. Well, I say only. There's actually a lot of problems with this banner, to be honest. Deuce, at this point, is very superseded by other banners, like by other support characters. Yuna, Rosa, loads of Y'shtola next week. There's a lot of characters that really just kind of put Deuce to shame, because Deuce's niche is that she augments magic attackers. That's all well and good, but why would you cover only portion of the roster when you could cover everybody with big auroras and HP damage pluses and all sorts of other stuff that, like, Yuna could provide? You're not going to go chasing after Deuce at this point unless you're a big fan of her. Vivi, on the other hand, is really good, but one of the problems with this banner, and probably the biggest one, is that anyone who wanted Vivi probably picked him up the last time he came out because he was much more exciting then. And while his LD boards and his rework, etc., do elevate him to current damage standards, which is really nice, we've probably all already got him. And if you haven't already got him, there are loads of magic damage dealer options available that most people will have picked up recently that kind of mean that Vivi's just not that exciting for a lot of people unless you love Vivi, which a lot of us do. But those of us that do probably picked him up the last time around. you know, you've got Varn, you've got your Setzer, you've got Exdeath, you've got loads of characters that can deal a large amount of damage in a short space of time and do so in different ways. Vivi's biggest quirks are that he has damage in like defense ignoring properties and the fact that he deals the damage to the party, which allows you to proc things like Odin, etc. And his rework has cemented him as a AoE fire damage magic attacker, which is fine, but with so many massive banners coming forward, like I know we talk about BT Plus era is coming, etc., but specifically, people want Zidane, people want Aphmau, people want Sid Reigns, people want Ace, and that's all very, very early on, not to mention any characters that come after them. So, if you got an opportunity to save here, you probably should take it. So now we have Would You Pull, of course, the section of the video where you, the viewer, can have your chance to have your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. Now, of course, a massive thank you goes out to my patrons for, you know, commenting, voting, all of that. This banner's not going to be a surprise to anybody. It was a little bit surprising to me purely on quite how weighted it was when I saw it, but also I'm not surprised. 0% of people said yes to gems. 8% of people said yes to a ticket, 0% of people said yes to less than 100 tickets, and a whopping 92% of people said that they weren't pulling on this banner. Now, like I said, a lot of people already have Vivi. A lot of people, you know, because of that, have no reason really to pull on this banner. I'm telling you now, people aren't realistically pulling here for Deuce. Like, it's rare, to say the least. But I think that that's just the nail in the coffin for this particular banner, and people have banners that they're looking forward to more, which is the reality of it. So going into comments, Spickle says, can confidently say no here as I got Vivi when his global first came out, nearly a year ago now, even got Deuce when chasing a Mid-Italian's LD, not that I'd pull just for this anyway, and I won't pursue a burst with tickets. Honestly, any of Exdeath's other banners are better probably than this. Zell is really good, Kieran's really good. Maybe you could value this over Lion a little bit, but Lion's banner also has Ignis on it, so that's a more worthwhile banner than this one. I definitely think that, you know, there's a lot more value to be had if you're chasing Exdeath on his previous banners than this one. Ferntendo says, I think I speak for most people who have been around for a while when I say the answer is no. Unless you missed out on Vivi last year, I don't see a reason as to why people would pull here. Deuce is seriously underwhelming, and Vivi is still a good unit, but most people who wanted him probably got him way back when he came out the first time. Great banner to save resources for older players with him already. I'd argue that this banner was good for newer, was good to skip for newer players as well. Not that Vivi is bad, not that Deuce is, I mean, she's not great, but like, people who like Deuce will still get use out of her. Why settle for this banner when so close by from now, there are much bigger, badder banners than this one? Like Zidane and Beatrix, Ishtola Renoa, Aphmau, who happens to come with Tifa, Sid Reigns and Mog. There's just so much more value in the future banners than there is in this one. And then finally, Nalthian says, I missed Vivi when he came as a global first LD, and even though I came back shortly after, I never really felt like I missed anything. Vivi's a fan favourite, of course, but he's never really got me excited in Dissidia. I picked up Deuce LD on his first appearance, and in spite of her kit being pretty solid, I've left her on the shelf since. Maybe some YOLO tickets for Vivi, but nothing more than a for fun pull. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with throwing some tickets at Vivi if you want him, just because you're happy to have like those tickets go into him. But the fact of the matter is he is just a damage dealer. While I quite like his LD call, it's definitely not up there with your Pharises, your Sephiroths, your Jax, your Kurosames, etc. It's a good one, and it has its niche uses, but I don't think it's one everyone has to have. Certainly not if you have access to Ignis. And yeah, he is a damage dealer. There are a lot of those. So if you love him, sure. But if you love him, you've probably already got him, so you don't really need to worry about pulling for him here. So that's all for today's video. Thank you all very much for joining me and watching along today. Let me know in the comments below if you're pulling for Vivi or even Deuce, or if you're, like most people, saving up for next week and what comes beyond. And obviously don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making, and leave a thumbs up as well, because it helps me out more than you probably realise. And I apologise for the lateness of this video. I actually did film this a couple of days ago and then realised that my sound was playing up and I've had to re-record the entire thing, so I apologise for the lateness of this video a little bit. Anyways, that's going to be it from me. Thank you all once again, and I shall see you next time. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care.